Hi, Misha here, and lately I've been doing pretty long historical, in-depth videos or feature videos. I thought for a change of pace, I would do a story time. And since we've had a lot of AK stuff and not a whole lot of AR stuff, except for the T65 recently, yeah, I brought my 6 Colt ARs out. And in this video, I want to talk about owning a brand. Sometimes people look at others that own maybe HKs or SIGs, Colts, even Berettas, heck, even Arsenals or Segas, as elitists, or owning them because, oh, you know, high-end or special collectible. And then that certainly can happen. But I don't think a lot of us are that way. A lot of us have much more individual and intimate reasons, frankly, for owning guns and for why we like the brands we like, tied to our past, tied to our experiences. And so in this video, I thought I would share why I own each of these Colts. And the rule is no kit builds, even if it's a complete Colt upper. So unfortunately, things like my DOE or my LMG are out. Now, these are factory Colt guns. Now, I might have modified them, you know, customized them a bit. But they started off as complete guns that I obtained from Colt, or, you know, someone else. It came actually out of the Colt factory, not just built with Colt parts. Hope that makes sense. And yeah, this is why. This is the rhyme, the reason why I own the ponies, why I play the ponies. And when you talk Colt ARs, you absolutely have to begin at the literal beginning. Regardless if you're a military collector or shooter, anything, it started here. Before the Colt SP1, we really didn't have civilian variants of military type guns. There weren't M1As or M14As before this. Of course, there were surplus M1 Grands, but no one was making M1 Grands for the civilian market. Ditto for the Carbine or Thompson. There was the 1927 Thompson, but that was brief. This was the first time a company really in America said, hey, we're selling these to the military. Let's sell them to law enforcement, civilians, as a Title I gun. Because Colt had a whole marketing plan for the SP1, for the AR15. They wanted a whole family. And they started working on this very soon after getting the AR-15. They obtained it at the very tail end of 1959, and Stoner came a short time later as a bonus, and they started working on the semi-automatic version to appease the ATF around 1962. Of course, they didn't know what the ATF would and wouldn't want. And the first rifles, the first 100, were made as kind of a pre-production run in 1963. In 1964 was the first production year, really, for the SP1, and not many were made. Now, my rifle here is a 1965, based on the serial and features, and that's exactly why I wanted it, the features. I grew up shooting an SP1. They were kind of everywhere. A lot of police even carried these guns back in the day. They had a very good reputation for not just reliability and dependability, but also accuracy. This 20-inch 1 in 12 twist barrel with the 55 grain ammo was known to be quite accurate. And the OEM 20 round mags had a good rep. The 30s, some people, and the 40s, those are all aftermarkets. They were known to be junk. But this is kind of the edgy gun. The more conservative people tended to go for the Ruger Mini 14. I guess what I'm saying is, back in the 70s and 80s, the weird people, the people that today probably own AKs, were the ones buying the SP1, and the normal people were buying the Mini 14 or, hunting guns. Anyway, I wanted an early one because SP1s, in the general sense, didn't change. The upper and the lower didn't change. They were slab side, meaning, no forward assist, no brass deflector, but also meaning no fence here on the lower and just an exposed mag release. The early Colt 601s and 602s were that way, but by the time of the 603, 604, they first went to the E1, the partial fence, and then the A1, the full fence. Now, of course, they continued to make the 604 slab side upper, but it didn't have a slab side lower. So this is a very specific range in a military gun, and that's what I wanted. And to get all the features, you need to get one with a serial, roughly speaking, under 10,000. One made before 1968, 1969. Some things I was looking for, some are quite obvious, like the 3-prong flash rider. Others not so much, like the front sling swivel held in with the rivet. Also, the front base that has smooth edges, not the flashing. And of course, these early guns would have non-chrome lined anything, and they just have a simple 12. Also, the early handguards are different, as is the bend for the gas tube. The early port door was a little different. The mag release went through some changes. Now on the lower, you see it has this, hopefully you see, this cross. Military guns had that too early on. And moving back, there is a roll pin right before you get to the stock. Originally, this receiver extension, buffer tube, was kind of kept in place. It would screw in, but then it was roll pin to keep it from backing out. They were really worried about that. Of course, the early stocks were different. No trapdoor. Things like that. Even the pistol grip was what's called a skinny grip. Just little things, and I wanted a period correct gun before the XM16E1 or A1. This is kind of what I was going for. And so I've kind of traded up over the years for different SP1s. And I've had this one for over 10 years and very happy with it. It has a few neat features. It has the small hole in the safety, which they did. Now, I had an option to get a different one. The guy had about 6, and he had a 1964. And feature-wise, the only difference, aside from the serial number, was the rear takedown pin had a small hole in it. This one doesn't. The reason I didn't care about having a hole there, I knew the front pin would not have one. Because this, like all SP1s, has the large .320 double screw head pin. That's one thing I had to change on this. This is a faux 601 pin, has a spring-loaded detent to keep it from slipping out. I just could not tolerate the screw pin, but all SP1s are going to have that. Just how it is. Internally, it has some neat features. It has the early Edgewater buffer, and the only SP1s that had fully chromed bolt groups were the pre-production 1963s. Even the earliest 64s that I've come across, and there might be one or two out there that's crept to, but that's, the ones I've seen, they all had a phosphated carrier. Now they still have a chrome bolt, and they have the early gas key, and they have the early machined pin and early firing pin. And what's fun about these, the trigger group inside here is very lightly modified, and for the bolt carrier, they only very small bit cut it back. So this is pretty close to what they were shipping to the military. It can't go full auto, but as time went on, they made more drastic changes to make sure it doubly couldn't go full auto. And since I grew up with SP1s, including one at home, I always knew I wanted one. And from a shooting point of view, even though this is about just under 40 inches long, it only weighs about 6¼ to 6½ pounds. That's great. It's just a light, well-balanced gun. It has a military trigger, but back then no one cared, and today I still don't. And they still take standard AR mags, so you're not really missing out anything there. It's just, if you're going to have an AR collection, this is the best thing. A lot of people do replicas and repros. And maybe today SP1s are crazy money, but for a long time, for what it would cost to do a replica or repro, you could just find yourself a nice used, especially if you didn't mind a police and LE trade-in, SP1. And yeah, I paid less for this gun than what people pay for the Colt reissues. And that was a bit of a premium, because back then, normal SP1s were $1,000. I paid more for this one because it was 1965. But I really like it. It's one I probably won't shoot because I don't want to risk damaging the furniture. You know, things get old. But other than that, yeah, it's in great shape for what it is. Holds up very well. Really cool guns. But now we kind of jump quite a ways forward, because the SP1 Rifle, and then beginning in the late 70s, SP1 Carbine, were kind of it until you get to the 1980s. Colt 9mm. Not bad for a factory trigger. With this one, we really are jumping forward a couple of decades. This is the AR1550. And at first, it looks like a pretty standard CAR15 two-position stock. The sling stretching on me there, sorry about that. It just locks in and out. Has the old school nut. This is kind of a transitional. Looks like a CAR15 stock, but it's not metal. It's what they call fiberlight. It has an A2 pistol grip, but on the other hand, it has traditional CAR handguards, pencil barrel. But this, of course, is in 9mm. And this is the semi-automatic take on Colt's 9mm SMG. That looked almost identical to this, saving this silly screw here. I hate those. But it had a 10.5-inch barrel instead of 16. Birdcage flash hider. This is one made around 1990, when they still threaded the barrel, still gave it a flash hider, but they removed the, frankly, to be honest, useless bayonet lug. It's when they were starting to make some concessions to the lawmakers. But yeah, now there was the Sp1 Carbine. Like I said, it came out around 1977, 78. But I never was super happy with the Sp1 Carbine, because it really wasn't much like an XM177 or even a GAL5, because it was a slab side. So even though I've owned one, I sold it. It just didn't make me happy. You know how it goes. This one is on a correct fence lower, and since it is a 9mm, we have this giant, most people think of it as a brass deflector. It's actually more of a gas shield, gas deflector. And then we have a cut down port door, no forward assist, and pretty standard. Why one of these? It's kind of one of those, why not? They're a lot of fun. 9mm carbines are a lot of fun. And under normal times, not insanity, they are inexpensive to shoot. Light recoil, great to train kids on. This was once a police gun for a local PD, so it came in quite affordable. And it runs really well. The U.S. Marines used the, or at least at one time used the SMG variant. But all in all, Colt's little subgun had limited success, let's say. But that's not to say that I didn't want one. And I mostly just have it because I think it looks neat, and it gives me a CAR15 style gun with, yeah, it has some A2 features, but it still retains a lot of A1, and, you know, fires a different caliber, and has the magwell insert here. This was eventually replaced in production by the modernized 6951, which, if this is based on the CAR15, the XM177, the 6951 is based on the M4 in 9mm. Yeah, happy to have this one because it's just fun. There's no other reason. I do also like how lightweight it is. It's a slim, trim little gun, and that's actually where the Fiberlight stock helps versus the original metal one. And with that, well, it's time to move into the Clinton era. Colt 6320. The LE-6920. Not 6520, but 6320. Now these guns started receiving this restricted roll mark on the magwell after the September 1994 assault weapon ban. And actually it would be retained for a while, even after the ban was lifted in 2004. I think it was just probably Colt using up existing forgings, and frankly just not big on change. I know, amazing, huh? Now this, at first, probably does look like a 6520, the so-called AR15 A4 lightweight carbine. It has a 16-inch pencil barrel. Now this would be a 1 in 7 twist, not a 1 in 12. It's threaded 1/2 by 28 with an A2 hider. Bayonet lug, yeah, that's not really terribly useful on there. We have CAR15 style handguards, and we still have this Fiberlight style buttstock, which even on military guns was in use through at least around 2000, 2001. But now we are going to a 4-position receiver extension, and we're going to the newer style of castle nut to retain it. We have the A2 pistol grip. We have forward assist, brass deflector, A2 port door. What this is, it was a special contract for police done with the field sights, as they call them. Essentially A1 sights. So, kind of like a Canadian C8 style sight instead of the fancier A2 style. These are more straightforward and lighter, and that's why some police departments preferred them. And so Colt did them. Now, some people really like these ban era guns because of their restricted LE markings. Honestly, that's not really my thing. But I do like the unique sight configuration, and the fact that this is still a very light, handy little carbine, but with a faster 1 in 7 twist rate, and the little bit more modern 4-position receiver extension buttstock. And even though it's not exactly correct, this is kind of my de facto so-called Blackhawk down carbine, kind of a early 90s, right before M4 kind of look, like the Colt 723 or 727, although those typically, the 727s would have the heavier barrel. And again, it's not exactly correct. It has a few later features, but this is a factory gun, and yeah, just one you don't see. This came in with that batch of LE trade-ins that CDNN had about 5 years ago, and most of them are 6520s, but there were a handful of these 6320s, and this is a great little shooter too. This to me is more interesting than, say, a Colt Sp1 Carbine, because at least it kind of represents an actual duty weapon. In that transitional period when you're getting away from CAR15 and moving on to M4. And yeah, that's kind of why I wanted it. It's just unique. So it has collector interest, but it's also a fun shooter, and I like the keep it simple, stupid appearance of this guy. Simplistic Vietnam era sights, and still has a fixed carry handle. But this would be amongst the last factory guns for contracts that would have fixed carry handles, because the next step is the flat top revolution. How do you ensure a whole generation wants something? Just tell them for 10 years they can't have it. That's really the secret to the success of the M4 design in general. Because, yeah, there was really no way to have this during the assault weapons ban. The adjustable stock was a no-no. Bayonet lug was a no-no. Flash hider, threaded barrel. And just anything too evil looking. Now, Colt did offer match target guns during the late 90s, early 2000s, kind of lightweight guns or competition guns. Yeah, but they kind of retained a CAR15 look. The M4 was new. At least everyone thought so. And Colt certainly pushed that narrative. It was 80% parts common with previous guns. Had at least the military version, a safe semi-burst. And originally, early versions had a fixed carry handle, but it would not be long at all before they would go to the 1913, the Picatinny rail with the removable carry handle, A2 sights. Likewise, the earliest M4s would have a CAR15 stock, but soon they would go to this new pattern around 2000. And they would go away from the CAR15 handguards that had kind of been a tried and true staple of Colt to this kind of new ovular pattern. And they did this because it allows for much better airflow and heat dissipation. In fact, it allows for double heat shields. And originally, the M4 was meant to just kind of be a carbine, a second-line gun to replace pistols, that kind of thing. And as you know today, it ended up being kind of the standard. And that's why everyone wanted one. But you really just couldn't get anything. And Colt, even if they would make a neutered version for the assault weapons ban, they weren't interested in selling such guns to the public. But by 2005, these started to kind of creep out. The LE-6920 would hit the scene. And really never let go. The LE row markings would eventually disappear, going to a nice M4 Carbine mark. We'd get Colt's defense. And we'd even get the opposite side selector marks here. Kind of nice. And these will start to come with H buffers. All the good stuff. And that's actually why this gun. I did try getting a few other carbines, DPMS, Bushmaster, Smith & Wesson. And some of them were maybe even built nicer than a Colt, but they didn't have all the features. Most of them had a 6-position extension, whereas the military guns have this 4. The way the buttstock felt was different. Some of them still had a fixed carry handle. Others didn't come with a removable carry handle. one thing I found, a lot of them retained either the old CAR15 handguards, or even if they had the ovular handguards here, they did not have the true double mil-spec heat shields inside, and that bugged me. Some would have the 203 step in the barrel, the M4 cut. Some wouldn't. Some would have M4 feed ramps for the receiver and barrel extension. Others wouldn't. And Colt, at least back in the day, was just about the only one that had this reversible side sling mount rather than a swivel on the bottom. These are all very small things, but I realized I just really wanted a Colt. And back then, a 6920, at first they were pretty expensive. They were about $1,300-$1,400 back when a Smith & Wesson was $700, $800. But then the prices would really fall between 2009 and 2010, getting below $1,000 in some instances. And this is when you could even find them at Walmart for a while. And that's when it really became such a very popular rifle. And what was great about these, you had an MP-tested bolt and an MP-tested barrel. They went through the same quality checks as a military gun. They weren't batch tested. And yeah, the finish wasn't always great. They weren't always the most accurate. They surely didn't have the best feeling triggers. But they worked, and they just kept on working. They were kind of very little flash, but they had a lot of substance. And again, this is deep into the War on Terror. This is the kind of gun that you saw soldiers, well, yeah, you did, not me, using on the news. So everyone kind of wants that. Now this one here is early configuration. Say early War on Terror. Still with the synthetic handguards, original stock, and even still having the carry handle on. Usually those will get pulled off. Again, still having the A2 grip as well. But it was just a gun I'd always wanted, and this isn't my original one. I've had 2 or 3 different ones over time for various reasons, but I've always tried to keep a 6920 in the safe over the past 15 or so years, and they just run. In fact, they always seem like a very worthy successor to the SP1, which growing up was just reliable. You heard all these things about how unreliable ARs were, then we go out and shoot the SP1s, and they just worked. And I had the same kind of experience with the M4. They just worked. And that was nice, not to have to worry about a gun. And they were never ammo sensitive either. Brass case, steel case, 55 grain, 62 grain, 77 grain. I don't care. And they're very smooth shooting. And the bolt travel is very smooth to operate. Yeah, a lot to be said about these. It's a shame that they're no longer as affordable and available as they once were. But this is just, it's a modern classic in my mind, especially in this early M4 configuration. It's certainly my kind of favorite traditional M4 look. And really they changed very little from their military guns when they did these. So they were starting to figure it out. Early guns would have the large trigger pins, but soon they would do away from that. About the time they dropped the LE restricted row markings. So now Colt guns, like other guns, are having just regular fire control group pins. One odd thing about Colts, they always machined off the selector stops. Just kind of one of those Colt things. On their semi-autos, I mean. Yeah, kind of those things you learn to kind of roll with. But oh yeah, my M4. Yeah, no matter which one, they're all just fun. They're all just good. And it's a symbol of essentially having survived the federal assault weapons ban. And this is really the first version that I had that really kind of standardized and made the flat top a common feature. Before that, you still had carry handles as the norm. But yeah, from here we get into the truly modern, gadgety looking guns. But that's not to say I don't like them too. It's just we're kind of progressing through the various eras. This has still got a little bit of that keep it simple, stupid, although it does have a bit of a beefier appearance. We have the, the heavier barrel. So it looks robust, strong, but still, direct and straightforward. But from here, we'll get to, basically we'll get to the point where it looks like there should be a can opener on the side of the gun. AR15 A4. Colts AR15 A4. And mine is definitely, I don't want to say customized, the bones are still the same, but it's just been very much accessorized. And as I've said in a number of past videos, this is something that took the better part of a decade. But the base guns here, Colt really offered two versions, the basic black and an FDE. And yeah, everyone wanted the black. And the AR15 A4 got a lot of buzz. I believe it was 2014 at SHOT Show that Colt first talked about doing this, but it got delayed. It might have been 2013, and some kind of worried it might not even come out. What made this interesting, this was the first kind of military style rifle Colt had done in a long time. Now they did military style carbines like the 6920, and they did, of course, the SP1 rifles, and they did plenty of competition, match target and the like rifles, but not a military rifle. And by that I mean 20-inch, heavy profile barrel, military buttstock, bayonet lug, half by 28 threads, flash hider, etc., etc. So this is kind of interesting. It was kind of a return to form, and it probably came out because of how well the LE-6920 M4s were doing, and a few other projects, and because Colt kind of had the stuff to do it, so why not? And the base gun was just a good, solid rifle. Had all the benefits of rifles. Yeah, a little bigger, a little heavier, but for a civilian, the dependability, the virtually non-existent recoil. These are just really slick, well put together rifles. Triggers, military trigger, but what do you do? And they were priced very fairly, around $1,000 to $1,200 new retail, at least when they came out. Fair enough, and not really that much higher than the competition. And this was a time when everyone was doing carbines. Not many were doing fixed stock rifles. Now, what is the difference between the M16A2 and the M16A4? Simple. A2 has a fixed carry handle. A4 has a removable handle with a 1913 Picatinny rail up here. That's literally the only difference. Everything else, the Knights Armament rail system, the optics, that's not what makes an M16A4. And these are very popular with the Marines at the beginning of the 21st century, and really only kind of fell out of frontline use in the last couple of years. They liked them for their range and accuracy, and that's something that translates well for civilians too. So a lot of us picked these up, kind of for their classic look. It's kind of hard to find a Colt factory-built gun that's a true A2. Most of them have something strange, like they have a heavy barrel, and when I say heavy, I mean heavy. Or they have the weird front pin, or they're still on a slab side lower. It just seems like every 80s A2 sporter I run across has something that always turned me off. There are a few kind of sweet spot ones out there, but they're few and far between. The A4s, while they're not perfect, they have a few oddities, like the M4 feed ramp. The A4s, they have the M4 feed ramps. That's really quite not noticeable. And so they kind of had what everyone wanted. There was a bit of talk about the F-marked front sights and everything, but good solid trapdoor buttstock. They were just good guns, and they were just, again, keep it simple, stupid, and they were just a good base. Colt wasn't selling you a bunch of stuff you didn't need. they let you accessorize. And it was just something different. And I can't even tell you how many customers tell me exactly that. They said they were tired of buying carbines, even if they were good. The A4, a rifle, was just something different, kind of something to get excited about. So it was a bit of a breath of fresh air to the AR market around 2014, 2015, at a time when it really needed it. So this kind of brought Colt back into the limelight. A lot of people recognize the A4, and it was good business for Colt. While I had plans to keep an A4, I was selling them pretty rapidly. I didn't have plans to go full on kind of M16A4 US Marine Corps clone. Rather, parts just kind of came my way. These Knights Armament handguards, these were a blim one, new but blim. They came with the foregrip. I did pick up the Harris bipod on Amazon or something. The sling and the mag carrier actually are legitimate surplus from our local store. They came in, so these are actually parts from Afghanistan, Iraq. And of course, the big deals on this would be the ACOG sight, which I really can't use, but I've actually finally came across a used one that I could, justify. And of course, the PEC designator, which was basically free, doing a favor for a friend. And these are just things I added, about one a year. It's kind of funny if I think about it. First were the handguards, and then kind of on from there. So it made it fun. This was a gun that I'm happy to have. I really do like shooting it. It's a good shooter. It doesn't have a lot of that sprung in the stock, and it's extremely reliable, not ammo sensitive or mag sensitive. And it was just a fun little project gun. Low pressure, low key. I wasn't trying to make an exact clone or copy, but every time I got it a little bit closer to kind of correct, it felt a little better. So just a lot of good memories with this gun. And it was Colt actually listening to the customers for once and delivering something that they wanted. Kind of rare for Colt, but they have their moments. They really do, and the A4 is really one of them. And it's a spiritual successor to the SP1 rifle. That's for sure. And our final pony is another rare example of Colt giving the customers what they wanted. Back when the 6920 was getting popular, that would be the 16-inch carbine version, they had the 6920 SOCOM, which was another 16-inch gun, but it was roll marked M4A1, and it had a heavy profile, although still 16-inch military type barrel. And the SOCOM 1 had the Knights Armament rail system, and the SOCOM 2 had the Daniel Defense free float. And these were very popular guns. But then they disappeared. And M4A1 roll marked lowers started to go for crazy money. People were paying $1,500 just for the M4A1 roll marking. And then Colt reintroduced these. First is the 6920. I guess what they call it, the pin, the PWHD or HDV, whatever, pin and welded heavy barrel is what it stood for. And it had standard handguard, and it had a military 14.5-inch barrel with a pin and welded A2 flash hider. And it was a true SOCOM barrel, including the flats underneath the handguards. At that time, again, this first version just had the regular handguards. But the people loved it. They had the correct barrel, had a good roll marking on the lower, and then they upped their game even more to what's called the LE-6920US SOCOM, and that's this version here. You got the M4A1 marking, also a property of US marking, as well as the Colts Defense. You got an H2 buffer. You got a Maytag grip set. You got a Knights Armament quad rail. You got the same 14.5-inch barrel. This originally did come with the extended A2. I replaced it with a Surefire, because why wouldn't you? Bayonet lug. Came with the Knight's foregrip. Ready to put an optic on. And comes with a standard M4 stock, but of course I put the BFAB SOPMOD on it just because I really like this buttstock. And this was as close as you could reasonably expect to get to a true M4A1. Now, what's the difference in the military between an M4 and M4A1? Simple. M4 was safe, semi-auto, and burst. M4A1, safe, semi-auto, full auto. So kind of like the original M16A1. But because of this change back to automatic fire, we did end up with some other changes to the design. This is actually why these changes, the M4 continues, and things like the SCAR never replaced it. Of course, the main deal was the heavier barrel that acted as a better heat sink. They also went to an H2 buffer, and they generally speaking just kind of strengthened some of the parts because the short system, especially on automatic fire, could have increased wear. I mean, it's just kind of part of it. And much like with the M16A4, handguards, rail systems became less of a luxury and more of a standard, as did having an ambidextrous safety. Flat top is still a standard, but you don't see many of the removable carry handles now. We have usually a rear sight. This is a Maytech, but you know, whatever rear sight. There's several that they've used over the years. And this has an aim point sight on it. An ACOG would also be fine, maybe an EOTech. You know, there's a whole list of approved sighting devices. And so, yeah, using this M4A1 as a starting point, the LE-6920US SOCOM, you could make a very good representation of a kind of late M4 Carbine, say post 2010s. So kind of late War on Terror type thing. So that was good. People love clones, and they didn't have to pay crazy money for an M4A1 marked lower. But of course, beyond that, it wouldn't matter for a hill of beans if it didn't shoot well. But luckily enough, this is a very nicely made, very smooth gun. Of course, very reliable. And it feels, it's heavy because of all the stuff on it, but it does feel solid. And it has all the correct features. Still even having that side sling mount that I was talking about on the original M4. And we're still having MP tested barrels, and they were still at this time doing C marked carriers and all that good jazz. So this could be the last great semi-automatic Colt. Heck, even the last good semi-automatic Colt, because after these, that's when things started to go kind of go downhill. You started to see guns like the Expanse. You started to see outsourced guns like the reissues. You started to see the CR6920. And even on these later production ones would go away from a standard kind of traditional roll mark to more of a modern dot matrix style laser engraving, if you will. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with that at all, but Colt collectors are a fickle bunch, and they want what they want, you know? So even with these, you started to see some corners getting cut that people didn't like. But nothing good ever lasts, I suppose. And that kind of gets us to where we're at today. You don't really see AR15 A4s, and when you see Colt 6920s, they're usually the CR, and they don't even say M4 on the side, they say Colt Carbine, which is just odd. And they kind of lost a lot of those proof marks and everything. But as we do move into 2021, you know, CZ is now owning Colt. They have control. They've left Hartford at this time kind of to its own devices. But I have to wonder how long that'll frankly last. So maybe there will be another good Colt. Who knows? But for now, even though I've had this one a few years, This and the A4 were the last ones that I really felt compelled to buy, because with those, Colt, yeah, those are the guns that I exactly wanted. Well, let's line them all back up and kind of wrap this video up. Colt 6320. AR15 A4. Good old AR strong. Colt 9mm. It's interesting shooting this right after the 223. And it held up. And there we have it. I at least own these guns, from the Sp1 to the AR15 A4, my 2 rifles, my carbines, including the 6450 and the 6320, and of course the 2 LE-6920s, one M4, one M4A1. So reasons are different. Some are more practical, some are more sentimental. But it really isn't, for me, and I don't think for a lot of people, elitism. It's just we like what we like. And a lot of times things like Colts or Arsenals or Vepers, at one time they're not exponentially higher than the competition. They might have a 10 or 20% premium, but it's only with time going on and when things get discontinued that prices get double or triple. So, I don't know. It is what it is. And I'm still perfectly happy to shoot really all of these except probably the SP1, because not that the gun itself will hold up fine, but you know, like the furniture, this old first generation Bakelite or fiberglass, it's not getting any stronger with age, and the edge water in it is certainly not doing it any favors. So this one is retired. For that I have my M16A1 build, but all the others I'm perfectly happy to shoot, and frankly I do that. So with that said, what brand do you own that might be considered a bit of a luxury, caviar, but you have your reasons for doing it too? Well, I think that'd be kind of a fun topic in the comments to talk about there. As always, if you could like, share, and subscribe, feel free to post any questions, and if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to the Patreon page. We might even put up a picture of a little horsey. Hope you're having a good day. This is Misha. I'll catch you very soon. Next time.